Darby Creek Trail, 1 mile. Alright, let's see what this says. People have used Darby Creek for thousands of years. The Lenni Lenape called this stream Muckraton. In the 1600s, Welsh and English settlers built farms and mills along Darby Creek. Well, isn't that nice? Just a brief little introduction there. And today we are indeed walking on the Darby Creek Trail. And this creek is, this trail is one of the most, it's an ancient place. And as that little sign very briefly said, the Lenni Lenape have been here for thousands of years. And it's a very strange place because you're gonna hear a lot of background noise on this trip, but we're between two roads. There's a road right here, and then there's the Blue Route, which is 476, which is a major highway through Delaware County, and it goes right there. Literally, you can see. I don't know if you can see the highway sign, but that's the highway right there. And just down is the creek. So let me see if I can quickly show you that. Here, it looks like a little trail. Just quickly check out the creek. And there's a very specific reason I'm here. Yeah, here you go. Here's what the creek looks like. I'll just quickly flip the camera around so you can see. Here's the creek. And it just goes for a ways. Someone's put a rope swing up over there, and yeah, that's what we're doing. Okay, so this place has changed a lot since ancient times. As that plaque said, the Lenni Lenape have been. Okay, sorry about that. The camera cut off, but as I was saying, the Lenni Lenape have lived here. And this landscape has changed a lot. As you can see, there are buildings now, and across the creek, there's the highway, as I was saying. So, why am I here? That's the big question. What's so good about this little creek by the side of a highway? And the answer is that this is where, in the 1930s, an amateur archaeologist, I believe it was two brothers, found or maybe they weren't brothers, I'm not sure about that, but in any case, two archaeologists, amateur archaeologists, very important distinction there, found a rock shelter with a grave inside of it. And as you can see along here, there are these, there are these rocky cliffs and outcroppings along the bank of the creek. And I don't know the exact details of the story, but presumably for thousands of years, the Lenni Lenape have been settling this area. And at some point, someone very important died here, and the tribe buried her. And that's right, it was a woman. So when these two amateur archaeologists found her grave, they knew it was special. And they did some digging, recovered some artifacts, brought them to the museum. I believe the University of Pennsylvania Museum. Could be wrong about that. Again, not sure the details of this story. But in any case, whoever they showed it to was interested and set up an actual archaeological dig. And what they uncovered was the skeleton of a woman. She was in her late 30s. In the paper I read about this, it was said that she was exactly 37 years old. How they know that, I do not know. But apparently she was 37 years old and she was buried here. And now I just had a birthday and I just turned 37. So I figured, turning 37, it would make sense to go visit the Queen of Darby Creek, who was buried here on her 37th year, and I'd like to pay my respects. Now, the thing is, the place she was buried on this creek is at the end of this trail. This trail, the Darby Creek Trail, is an ancient Indian trail along this creek. Again, the Indians have been here for thousands of years. And at one point, this trail was just a pathway through the woods that they used to use to travel along Darby Creek. In the watershed of Delaware County, Darby Creek is one of the most important creeks. It connects the landscapes of the upper Pennsylvania Plateau to the lower Schuylkill River Valley, and connects up with the Delaware River farther along. And so as a place for hunting and fishing in the summertime, this would have been a perfect place for the Indians to come and set up their summer camps. Now, according to the paper I was reading, this would not have been a permanent location. The Indians would have migrated in the summertime and springtime. They would have migrated down out of the mountains to this area to hunt and fish, and then in the wintertime they would have migrated back up into the mountains to stay the winter. So, and the way they know that, the way the scientists who studied this know that, is based on artifacts that were found at the grave along with the Queen's body. Many artifacts were found from everything from stone tools such as spear points and scrapers, to things like pottery and jewelry, and even some, I believe, some other sort of tools and jewelry and grave goods. That's what sorry, my brain is not working. Anyway, so the scientists studied the rock that the stone tools were made out of and determined the location where they came from. And various rocks that were found at the grave site came from various places in Pennsylvania. Some were lava rocks from Cumberland County, I believe, or somewhere farther along up that way. Other rocks are from New Jersey, or at least that's the closest location that those rocks could occur in. Other rocks are shale from northern PA. Again, I'm not sure how they know the exact locations, but they sort of can guess that those rocks are not from this area on the Darby Creek. They're from elsewhere, which means that the Indians either were trading or were traveling to those places and bringing those rocks with them when they came here. Now, how do they know that this burial was for a queen and not just some random person in their tribe? Well, the main reason they know this is that when they dug up her body, this Indian queen was oriented with her head facing east, pointing east, aligned to the east. And at the head of her grave, where Christians and others put headstones, right? The Lenni Lenape traditionally put a post, a wooden post to mark the grave. And if it was of someone like a chief, they would put the post and then often paint the post with red coloring, or if the person was a doctor or someone of importance like that, doctor or physician, basically a medicine man, they would have gotten various other things like maybe a turtle shell or flowers, whatever they used in their medicine. I believe flowers were also given to graves of priests and chiefs and their wives. So when they dug up this grave, they found a post hole where that post would have been at the head of the grave. That's how they know she was very important. I think often when we think of Native American cultures, we don't realize that women were very important in the Lenni Lenape culture. Women played traditional roles in their culture, but they weren't necessarily second-class citizens. They were very active members of their communities, and often they were queens and leaders. This is true across tribes across North America and elsewhere, as far as I know. So it's very possible, when I was reading the paper for this, about this burial site, there's a paper that was published, I believe in the 1970s, about this site, which had been excavated in the 30s. And in that paper, the archaeologists insisted that this woman was the wife of a chief. Maybe they know that for anthropological reasons, and maybe that's something they discussed with Lenni Lenape tribes. I am not sure. But I also didn't see anything in the paper that would have precluded the notion that she was actually just the chief herself. And I'm going to go with that truth until I'm corrected. So I choose to believe, whether she was the wife of the chief or the chief in her own right, she was a queen. And so I'm calling her the Queen of Darby Creek. Now, one of the peculiar things about this paper, or the research I've been able to find on this, is that I haven't been able to find a date. Meaning, I don't know if any carbon dating has been done on the bones that were recovered, or if any of the stratification of the soil layers around the grave were able to be dated. In any case, no date has been found, and so I can't tell you how old the grave was. But we're coming up on it soon, so I'll get back to you when we get there. All right, we have arrived at the burial site of the Queen of Darby Creek. Now, one of the great tragedies of life in America is that we have more or less paved over a lot of our ancient sites. And that is exactly the case with this location. As you can see behind me, the burial site has been completely paved over. The rock shelter where the Queen was buried no longer exists, as far as I know, and instead it's now a municipal parking lot for school buses. So, not very scenic, not very special, but still special to me. Now, there is a little point of reference here in the landscape that you can still make out, because if you look up behind me, there's a ridge line above this parking lot, right up there, right? And from that ridge line came a little creek called Langford Run, and the creek came down here and then out into Darby Creek right here. And there's this little pathway and a couple sewer caps that kind of mark where Langford Run used to be. And from the paper that I read about this, the rock shelter where the burial of the Queen was located, oh, look at that, a hawk. There is a beautiful hawk. Let me see if I'll turn the camera around and zoom in. But whenever I visit these places, if you see a bird of prey, it's usually a sign from the ancestors, right? There's the hawk. Maybe that's a sign from the ancestors that the queen is expecting us and says hello and watching over us as we visit her grave. I'm not sure. But in any case, the Langford Run came down this way, down to the edge of the creek. And the paper I read basically said her burial ground was somewhere near where Langford Run enters Darby Creek. In fact, there were 2 rock shelters and 2 graves found. And the second rock shelter, according to the paper I read, was about 100 yards away. Whether it was 100 yards up that way or 100 yards down the creek that way, I'm not sure. But somewhere was another rock shelter. And another body was found another skeleton was found in that rock shelter. So this was clearly a very important place for the Indians. And they would have come here during the summer to hunt and forage during the spring and summer. This area was all wood, wetland area back then. So there were shellfish that they could harvest from the wetlands. And in fact, at the grave, one of the major items that was found were tons of shellfish, shells from shellfish, like mussels, essentially. And there was essentially a midden of shellfish shells that the Indians had left from when they had harvested them and eaten them thousands of years ago. So they clearly were here at least for a while. And they were seafood lovers. So now this area, I've never actually been here myself, but I've had this area on my list of places to visit for many years, over a decade, and I've looked at it on Google Maps many times. And I actually remember before this parking lot was built or rebuilt, there was something else here. I think it was another parking lot of some sort, as far as I remember, but it wasn't nearly as close to the water, or maybe it hadn't been fully redeveloped. So I wonder if I sort of just missed the window by a couple of years to find any artifacts. Now I could look around. I may spend a moment looking around on the banks just out of curiosity, but I don't have much hope. And the reason is I already see trash. Like, if you can see, there's a chair here. Also, like, just the fact that there are this massive sewer pipe right here, and I can see like old concrete and cement coming out of the bank behind me. So I'm not too confident or hopeful that I'll find anything like truly ancient. I think this place has been thoroughly reworked and trashed. But I'm going to take a brief gander and I'll get back to you if I find anything. Now, would you look at that? I turned off the camera and immediately saw a little clamshell from the inside of the creek. I don't know if this is the species of clam that the Indians would have eaten. Probably not. I don't know, but maybe. And of course, yeah, they're everywhere. Look, there's more. It's really cool. There's all sorts of stuff. I'm just looking around and seeing all kinds of interesting trash. Like, what is this? Oh, that's sort of stuck. I don't know what that is. Old tiles. Lots of trash and concrete and bits of rusty, that looks like a fence post maybe. So there's lots of trash around here. Honestly, I don't think it's really worth me spending too much time looking around. There's some interesting sedimentary rocks like this. But yeah, I'll look around a little bit longer, and if I do find anything, I'll show you. All right, always got to throw at least one stone when you see ice, right? Here we go. Woo! Didn't even go through. All right. Here's something. This is an old piece of, could be brick, could be stoneware of some sort. Kind of feels more like stoneware. Look at the curve on that. But that's definitely not ancient. So I think I'm not going to spend too much more time looking here. It's not worth it. This whole place has been completely changed since ancient times, and that's one of the sad facts about the fact that in America we haven't preserved too much, at least on the East Coast. On the West Coast and in the Heartland and different places, they've done a good job. And I actually think PA has a very strong archaeological society and culture. Now, I mean, archaeology is a fraught science because a lot of native groups don't really like archaeologists. Archaeologists have a history of, well, let's put it this way. A lot of looters call themselves archaeologists, when in fact they're just looting. They're not actually studying their finds. They're trying to make a quick buck, and by selling finds to collectors or museums. And unfortunately, before this grave was discovered in the 1930s, or by that time, most of the native sites in this area had been looted, and so there really wasn't too much left. And actually, that's one of the reasons why this find was significant in the first place. I'm going to turn around here, because I don't think I'm allowed back there. I'm seeing some no trespassing signs, so we're going to turn around before we get in trouble. But essentially, yeah, I guess the point is that, this place the grave was significant at the time because by that point, graves and native sites of that caliber with that many grave goods and with a skeleton were very rare. Presumably, when the settlers first arrived, those sorts of sites would have been plentiful because there are many large glacial boulders in this area, and the creeks have weathered down the hills, revealing many rocky outcroppings and perfect sites for burials and rock shelters. And we know from the historical record that when the Swedes colonized here and the governor of New Sweden sent people up the creeks, they found Indian villages all along the banks of all of the creeks around here. So there would have been villages and other settlements all up and down these creeks. And when the settlers came and the Indians got wiped out, for a time those old village settlements and other areas like burial grounds were probably just undefended and completely looted, and the findings scattered to the wind by looters and traders and other archaeologists, right? So that's probably what happened here. There probably were more burials and more grave goods and more interesting sites in this along Darby Creek, but sadly we don't have any. And the only one that survived to the modern time, when, at least if you call it the 1930s modern, when archaeologists could properly excavate it, was the burial of the Queen of Darby Creek. Now, one other thing to mention about this place is that I do have to talk about the highway. Now, if you look behind me right there, that is the wall of the highway. And it literally was built right along this creek in the 1970s. And my cousins talk about when, I wasn't born then, but my cousins and my uncles, they talk about when the Blue Route, as we call it in Delaware County, as the Blue Route was built, when it was built, it was empty for a while. They built it, but no cars were allowed to drive on it yet. But they opened it to pedestrians, so you could go biking on the highway for miles and miles. Anyway, this was very controversial because building this road really kind of cut through some very important places in the landscape of Delaware County. The Blue Route, they had to dynamite a lot of sections. And, look, it's right up against the creek. That wall is right there. And presumably there would have been Native American sites that got dynamited. And maybe even colonial sites that got dynamited to build the Blue Route. And there were, I don't know if there was any activism to try to stop that from happening. There might have been, but it wasn't successful. And in my head, it always, these problems, these questions of preservation always make me a little, well, here, I'm going to stop here, actually. These questions of preservation always make me a little sad, because who is going to stop building a highway in order to preserve the remnants of an ancient burial of a native queen? Probably no one, right? The Queen of Darby Creek had no advocates at that time to say, hey, wait a second, maybe we should at least put a plaque or some notification that she was even there. And maybe that's one way we could get together in Delaware County now and do right by her. We could advocate for someone to put a plaque at the intersection of Langford Run and Darby Creek. Maybe that's what we should do. What do you think? Let me know.